Hello, we are announcing a brand new giveaway for 75,000 subscribers. All you have to do is obviously follow me. We are giving away one lightsaber from Lightsabers. They are sponsoring this giveaway, so what you have to do is go to the pinned comment down below, follow Lightsabers on Instagram, like their image, and tag 2 of your friends, and you will be entered into our giveaway. We will be doing this giveaway until we hit 75,000 subscribers here on PPSW. Thank you again for your continuous support. Our story begins inside of the mall. The powerful being known as Abeloth was summoned from her rest. She had been sitting dormant in the mall, unable to leave for centuries, or maybe it was thousands of years. She wasn't really sure. She was turned off from everything in the galaxy for so long, though she was awoken from her rest when the Force sent a ripple all the way to the mall. The entire Force was offset by this disturbance in the Force. It was 2 beings of the Force trying to create another being. 2 Sith Lords, to be more precise. The darkness of their intention drew Abeloth to rise, and search through the Force to find what this powerful being was. It was a reaction made by the Force itself. The Force was not to be tampered with, and the forces of evil were trying to influence the midichlorians to create life. So instead of giving life to the forces of evil, the Force itself created the most powerful being the galaxy had ever seen, one that could disrupt the light and the dark, one that could create balance or imbalance. Abeloth, using her deep knowledge of the Force, influenced the midichlorians to create this chosen one within her realm. The mother would become the mother of Anakin Skywalker. The Sith triggering her awakening would allow her to intercept their intended creation and create Skywalker herself. She had no intention of caring for Anakin. Her only intention was to use him. Surely he could help her get out of this trap here inside of the mall. If he could, then she could return to the Ones and return to her role as the mother, or even exact revenge. Of course, that would take time. Anakin was just an infant, and she would have to wait until he was fully developed, so she would take advantage of that. However, Abeloth didn't think there would be an issue with it because she herself would manipulate the Force itself to force Skywalker to grow up with an accelerated growth. This would form Anakin into an adult, though with the development of an infant. Abeloth would take this time to influence everything Anakin believed, twisting his mind and teaching him the ways of power. For the mother, she just needed a scapegoat. She didn't need to feel a sense of bond with Anakin, or even an ounce of care. Her lust for revenge absorbed her entire being. Once she was free, she would exact her evil revenge on the galaxy itself. It would take a short period of time, but she would fill Anakin's mind with all the information she had within her. Anakin, without control over his surroundings or even his own thoughts, would be influenced to believe that the mother was wronged by the Ones, and that he should destroy them. Abeloth knew that the shockwaves throughout the Force would force the Ones to bring Skywalker to them. His creation alerted every being within the galaxy with higher power in the Force, these being the Ones and even the great Bendu. Though Skywalker didn't know or even understand his importance, his only thoughts dwelled on his purpose, and that was his purpose for his mother. Abeloth took full advantage of him, and that's all there was. Abeloth knew how to break out of the mall, but she couldn't do it herself. Her location was surrounded by numerous black holes. She could use the Force to create a path for herself, but the tension between the black holes and her using the Force would rip her apart. So, using Skywalker, she would force him to hold apart the black holes and give her safe passage out of the trap. After about a full year of coaxing Skywalker into her personal slave, she forced him to open up the black hole, and the moment he created a path for her, she escaped and disappeared, leaving Anakin behind, stuck in the mall by himself without any means to escape. Anakin didn't realize what everything that happened meant, but he was trapped, and that was the only conclusion he came to. A base of resentment began to build within him, though without proper growth he didn't know what these feelings he was feeling were. All he knew was that this rage bellowed within him. Before he could do anything and act on his own, he was thrown from the mall and woke up somewhere he'd never been before. Having been a part of darkness his entire life, he didn't know how to properly understand what it was he was looking at. Anakin woke up laying on the ground, looking up towards the sky above him. The colors were immaculate, but after a full year inside of the mall, it was hard. The brightness was too bright. He was someone born in the darkness, molded by it. To see the light was now blinding. He stood up and turned to see the garden of colors of grass around him, and he walked over to the water and saw a reflection of himself in the water. He never knew what he looked like until this moment. He didn't know much of anything up until this moment, and as his head turned around observing the world around him, he heard a soft, calming voice. The essence and the Force from this voice was warm. It was peaceful. It was everything the mother was not. When Anakin turned his head, he saw a glowing, beautiful woman. She introduced herself as the daughter, and Anakin fell off his feet in shock and in terror. The warmth he felt from her essence could have been deceptive. Maybe that's what it was. Was she a product of Abeloth, or was she something else? The daughter calmly spoke to Skywalker, telling him that she was not of any danger. But she was here to guide him to the Father. Anakin was very curious as to what was happening, but the daughter explained it in simple terms. Skywalker was brought here to help restore the imbalance. It was his choice if he wanted to do as such. She started walking forward and requested that he follow, which he did, very quickly, and he kept pace with her. She didn't have much to say and he didn't have much to ask. He was very obviously afraid of what the Father could be, but if the Father was anything like the daughter, then surely this place could be fine for him. Though the daughter made a point to inform Anakin that the son was very much so like the mother, he would try his best to influence him to make poor decisions. She warned Anakin to not interact with him, suggesting that if he sees the son, he should be very wary of the son's intentions. Anakin understood, and when they finally arrived at a massive castle, the daughter told Anakin to go in and talk to the father. He'd be waiting for him. Anakin nodded his head, and when he entered the massive hall, he saw an older figure sitting at a throne. Anakin asked why he was brought here, to which the father slowly levitated off the ground and smiled at Skywalker, requesting that he come with him on a walk. Anakin, still unsure of this predicament, nodded his head, and continued to walk with the father. The father told Anakin that everything that happened was never meant to happen. The Force is as it wills, and his creation was the will of the Force. Though how Anakin became a creation of the Force was not intentional. Anakin asked how so, to which the father explained that the Force is what binds the galaxy together. It exists within every living being, though there are those with power, and those individuals with power can try to influence the Force for their own power and on the galaxy itself. The dark side users that tried to create a living being did so with the dark side of the Force. The Force reacted negatively, and therefore it created Skywalker. Anakin asked how he played into all this. The father told him that he was meant to bring balance or disrupt the balance. The father continued, suggesting that he couldn't control Skywalker and he wouldn't try to. It wasn't his position. As he was a father, he could give suggestions to Skywalker, and the only reason he was brought here was to replace him. Anakin asked what was meant by that, to which the answer was given. The father was slowly dying. He would no longer be able to control the balance between the daughter and the son, and he needed someone that could. Anakin told the father that he was afraid. He was controlled by so much fear and all he knew was darkness, and the cold reek of the dark side. The father knew that, to which he told Anakin that there were beings across the galaxy that could help him with that, but it was his choice. Anakin could very easily kill the ones, just as he could kill the mother. This perked up Anakin's attention. The ones being so divided, specifically the son and the daughter, wouldn't be able to stop Abeloth without the help of the balance, which either came from the dying father or the chosen one himself. The father was trying to assist Skywalker with finding his place in all this, being that Abeloth gave Anakin so much power without the information necessary to control it. He could very easily turn into a whirlwind in the Force, or even that of a wound in the Force. The father knew that if Skywalker turned into either of those, he could become an unstoppable force. If he turned into a wound, he could turn into Nihilus, an ancient Sith with an unstoppable hunger of the Force. Anakin wouldn't be able to be stopped, though. Not by the Jedi, not by the Sith, the Bendu, the Wills, the Ones, or even Abeloth herself. The father knew this, and so he suggested that Anakin go out into the Force and learn everything he could. When he was ready, the throne would belong to him, if he saw fit to become one of the Ones. Anakin asked how he could do as such. He didn't know how he got here. The father was the one that got Anakin here, so he taught Skywalker how to use the Force to travel. It was a rare gift, one that belonged to the Ones, a dyad in the Force, or the Chosen One himself. Very few creatures could obtain this power. Of course, becoming one with the Force allowed mortals the ability to do so as well. Regardless, once Anakin understood more of the power, he told the father that he would be back. Skywalker vanished into a flash of light and crashed down on a planet in the Outer Rim, on a tan planet. The colors were far less vibrant than on Mortis, but Skywalker felt a deep connection to a being of the Force that was here. It was strong and it was massive, though Anakin wasn't sure what it was. He looked around and saw nothing but a massive plant. The ground began to rumble as a deep voice rung out, echoing across the land, asking why the Chosen One chose to come to Atalan. Anakin stepped back, looking at a great being, large in scale and wise beyond proportion. Similarly to the one, Skywalker was beyond confused with what he was looking at. This massive beast wasn't deadly or even violent, just calm. The same aura as it was with the daughter, not quite as pure, but just as warm. The great Bendu asked Skywalker once more why he came. here. Anakin looked at the Bendu and shook his head. He didn't know himself. The Bendu told Anakin that he knew he was lying, and requested once more to know why he came to this planet. Anakin looked at the Bendu and told him that the Bendu had the warmest aura out of any of the living beings across the galaxy. The Bendu asked Anakin if he knew what he released out into the galaxy. Anakin again shook his head, not realizing that Abeloth was too making waves through in the Force. She had run to Kessel and slaughtered the innocents of the entire planet. She was doing it to garner the attention of the Force users around the galaxy. Part of her was hoping to create Skywalker into a wound in the Force, but he was on Mortis, protected by the Father when that happened, so he couldn't become a wound. She was going to move on from Kessel so that she could cause more pain and suffering for the innocents of the galaxy. The Bendu knew that Anakin was unaware at this point. He was so uninformed but possessed a greater power than 99% of the living beings in the galaxy had. The Bendu told Anakin to sit down and feel for the Force, so Anakin listened as Bendu explained the Force to Skywalker, talking him through the steps of understanding the Force and understanding how there was light and how there was dark. There is also balance. The dark side users such as the Sith and Abeloth feed off of the darkness and hurt the Force itself while doing so, while individuals like the Night Sisters use the dark side of the Force as a means to utilize a greater understanding of the Force. They acted in agreement with the Force. The will of the Force was far greater than the demands of any given being, mortal or immortal. The Bendu continued telling Anakin that it wasn't his fault for the creation of Abeloth, and it wasn't his fault for the release of Abeloth from the Maul, even though he was the main contributor to her release. Bendu knew just as well as any of the other high-power beings that Skywalker had the ability to disrupt the current balance or the ability to hold it together. Anakin asked what the Sith and the Jedi were, as Bendu went through the elongated history of both of them, and how they came to be. He then explained that while the Jedi may have used the light, they were not a burden on the Force. Their actions may have been influenced by a corrupt republic, but they themselves did not harm the Force as it was. They worked in alignment with it, whereas the Sith that created Skywalker tried to bend the will of the Force to themselves. Anakin had a weird issue with this. Sure, the Jedi were the light bringers of the two religious groups, but without the Sith, he simply wouldn't exist. How could he resent the Sith? They were the ones that gave him life. Yet at the same time, if it weren't for the Sith, Abeloth wouldn't have erased an entire planet's population. Anakin asked how he could stop the Mother. Bendu told Anakin that he would have to learn more about the Force, suggesting that the High Priestesses of the Force, located within a hidden location in the galactic core, would be able to help him through the process, and they would help him through a series of tests. Bendu did warn Skywalker, telling him that the power he possessed could very easily determine the fate of the galaxy, telling him to not allow the sins of Abeloth affect his feelings, or she could use them to destroy the fabric of the Chosen One, and even more than that, the fabric of the universe. Anakin nodded his head. The information Bendu gave was a little bit more grounded than the information that the Ones gave him, though it left Skywalker with many more questions about the Force that he had yet to understand. More specifically, his powers within the Force. Skywalker ended up on a planet very similar to the one he was just on, though there were floating platforms in the air and there were voices. This place felt so familiar and yet he'd never seen it. Anakin turned his head to look at a number of voices that were calling out to him. Their aura was a mix in the Force between light and dark. They were the High Priestesses of the Force. The five of them emitted different emotions. The leader was Serenity, the natural state that the Force resided in. After her was joy, anger, confusion, and sadness. These priestesses actually brought Skywalker here. It was where the Force was most balanced. This undisclosed location was where someone like Skywalker would thrive. His power could grow here, but it could also become steadied here. Anakin wouldn't have to go anywhere, and he could become like the priestesses and simply exist within the realm of the Force. But he couldn't yet do that, could he? He had to get rid of this monster he released into the galaxy. The Jedi and the Sith were currently reacting to the return of Abeloth. The Jedi, because it was causing deaths of billions, and the Sith because if Abeloth got too strong, then she would take the power in the galaxy that they were trying to get themselves. The arrival of Abeloth set off the cosmic balance. Sure, the Sith and the Jedi would continue to be rivals with each other, but unless there were any cataclysmic events, the chances of anything coming from their bickering and disrupting the balance of the Force were highly unlikely. Only few Sith in the history of the galaxy were able to upset the balance so much. Anakin asked the priestesses what he needed to learn to completely harness his abilities to stop the Mother. The priestesses, unlike the Bendu, the father and the daughter, told Anakin that the Force would will it to happen. If Abeloth was meant to destroy the entire galaxy, then she would. If Anakin was meant to stop her, then he would. Though, for Anakin to know the truth about either of those scenarios, he would have to go through a number of tests. The High Priestesses would make Anakin challenge his adherence to the balance by forcing him down a path of darkness, putting him on Exegol and Korriban to see if he fell into the darkness, to see if he was as corruptible as some of the Jedi had shown to be. Especially since Anakin grew up in the Maul surrounded by darkness, he should naturally be drawn to it. Anakin's journey to these dark planets was one that left the young Chosen One bereft. He realized how terrible his short adolescence was, and he wished to never have been a part of such darkness again. The next trials of Anakin Skywalker would consist of a study of the light. Of course, the light was a more useful side of the Force, but total surrender to the light could leave Anakin left without the necessary strength to kill Abeloth. Of course, the idea being that Abeloth was too dangerous to just lock away this time. All the higher beings of the Force agreed that Abeloth should have been disposed of, but it was the ones who willed it, and so they believed with the Force guiding it, everything would occur as it naturally should. The only reason anything even changed was because of the Sith, so naturally would Skywalker even be a part of the downfall of the Sith? Anakin's journey to the light side filled planets had him grasping the power of the Force with his total balance. The light side was good, but it wasn't without its faults. Anakin understood, as many of these powerful beings did, that the Force could not work without balance. Too much light withheld the balance. Obviously, being that the dark side of the Force was a leech, it couldn't totally be disregarded. This too was incredibly beneficial for the Priestesses to know, and then they showed him the Dagobah, one of the darker worlds in the Force, but it had a gift that could never stop giving, and that was the ability to have incredibly detailed Force visions. When Anakin entered the cave, he saw so much destruction, he wasn't sure what from, though there was an opportunity for said destruction to come to an end. The purpose of the Priestesses showing this to Anakin was to see his reaction. The Force would will what was to happen, regardless of an individual's decision. Everything was as the Force willed it, so in the scenario of Abeloth or the Sith winning, then surely Anakin would have to accept his inability to stop it. However, if he was the one to win, then he would have to accept his role in stopping the galactic carnage. After time with the High Priestesses, Anakin was released from the core and allowed to go anywhere he wished. They gave Anakin one warning, one very cryptic and similar to the one he received from Bendu. It was to not allow destruction to control him. If he allowed it, then it would ruin him. The obvious warning being that if he allowed a genocide to enter within him, the echoes of the Force would create a wound out of the genocide, and therefore a wound out of him as well. Skywalker didn't need to know that though, because if he did, then he would try to prevent it. Again, the message being that it was all through the will of the Force. Anakin disappeared from the galactic core and ended up on Hongor. He could feel the presence of his mother. She was close. After all, Hongor was right next to Kessel, and she had just finished off the few unfortunate Jedi who arrived to stop her. Abeloth knew her son was here to stop her. Of course he was, but she wasn't going to allow that to happen. She had a grip on him unlike even the Force could have. She controlled him for so long, and he had only just begun to realize his potential within the Force. When Anakin saw his mother coming, he tried to use an array of Force abilities on her, none of them doing the trick. Abeloth stopped in front of her son and used the Force to crush his body into the ground as she stood over him, telling him that he was nothing in comparison to her. Anakin listened to her as she belittled him, and then just to show him how little he truly was, she began to mercilessly kill individuals on the planet in front of him. He couldn't handle it. Again, using the Force, he lifted her off of the ground and into the air. Anakin ripped her ability to use the Force from her as she withered into an ancient woman, back into her feeble form as a normal mortal. But there was too much Force for Anakin to take from her as it fed back into her and she became powerful again. So Anakin did the only thing that was necessary to create balance. As darkness fell, so would the light, as Skywalker opened up two black holes next to Abeloth. The planet itself and the evil Force user ripped apart, and when Anakin opened his eyes, he was lying on the ground, looking up towards the sky above him. The colors were immaculate, but after opening up two black holes, he felt without power. When he looked over, he saw a man. He hadn't seen this individual before, but it was the sun. He had the same essence that belonged to Abeloth. That's because the two of them drank from the font of power, both of them corrupted by the same dark, evil power. The sun came forward with a hand and reached out, but Skywalker was no fool to this, using the Force to push the sun back against the wall. As Anakin got up, he pushed the sun down to kneel before him, telling the sun that he would maintain order on Mortis. When the father died, Anakin took up the mantle of the One on Mortis, residing over the legendary Force planet, utilizing the balance of the Force that the galaxy needed. The Jedi and the Sith would continue to fight like little children, bickering over what the Force was really meant to do. The Sith would rise, but as it was in the Force, to meet powerful darkness, a powerful light would rise to meet it, and that powerful light would restore the balance, a cycle within the Force, allowed to persist due to the selfless actions of the Chosen One himself. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Tiger Boy, Darth Revan, Pimp Daddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Jedi Sloth, Mad Nana Studios, Anakin 003, Lemon Knight, Flambasis, Lord Deadwing, and a man with 3 first names. Smash the like button. And the next video is our incredible animated short. I'm super excited for you guys to see that, so prepare to stick around for that. Let's talk about the story. For those of you that are above the age of 18 anywhere else in the world and above the age of 21, the drinking game is how many shots can you take whenever I say the Force or Anakin or the Mother in this video. Have fun with that. Of course, I'm just joking. Anyways, this story was interesting. This story was actually really hard, and I know this is really short for one of my typical videos, but this is a very difficult video to do. Because it's one, very different, and it's very focused on the Force and the aspect of the Force itself. And this is something that I've consistently tried to embrace and learn about the Force, as just listening to people like George Lucas and Dave Filoni and Freddie Prinze Jr. is the guy who voices Kanan Jarrus, how they just talk about the Force and all the aspects of the Force, and everything is essentially as the Force wills it. And the thing that Freddie Prinze Jr. talked about, he's someone that learned directly from Dave and George about the Force, and he talked about it on a podcast, and it was really incredible to listen to, and I highly suggest, if you can find it, watching it. But like, the Force itself is as it wills, and so what that essentially means is that the Force is going to do it's like almost everything is predetermined destiny. It's kind of like for example, it's very intertwined in what Star Wars is. Star Wars is a Greek mythos. It's based in the classics, right? That's George Lucas saying that, not me. And so, being that it is as a Force wills it. So a great example that Freddie Prinze Jr. uses, it's like how Darth Maul is Sisyphus. He's a Greek individual, he's a Greek mythology individual, and his game is like, he can never get up the hill. He's pushing a boulder up a hill, and he can never get it to the top of the hill. But Maul's in on the game. He knows that he has to keep pushing the boulder up the hill, even though when he gets to the top of the hill, he's going to roll back down. That's what the Force is. It's like he's in on it. So like, these aspects of the Force are just intertwined in the story of Star Wars itself. It's like, that's why there's no Jack Bauers in Star Wars, or Jason Bournes, or James Bonds, or anything like that. They don't exist in Star Wars because it is as the Force wills it. And this is a story about that, and this is like an interpretation of it, and it's very out there. And I think that's something that I always try and experiment with on this channel, is whether it's Old Republic to the sequels, I'm always trying to experiment with what I can do in a video, and this is definitely probably the most experimental video I've had, and so I'm expecting it to get, not the greatest reception, and I'm okay with that, because we're playing around with it, and I'm kind of playing around with what the Greek mythos, the whole George Lucas, Dave Filoni, the whole story of the Force and everything behind it. And I hope you all enjoyed it. So if you did, smash the like button. You know what to do. Animation's coming out on Thursday. I'm super psyched. Anyways, I love you all. Spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.